Hey, everybody, real quick, if you need a recap of Bridgerton Season 1 and 2, I've got you covered. Just hit the tab in the upper right-hand corner. It'll take you right to it. Dearest viewer, 'tis the season, and you know what that means. Lady Whistledown is officially back. She has produced her latest newsletter. It's the first one of the season, and she introduces the new heavy hitters that are all trying to vie for that diamond status. There is the exquisite Miss Malhotra. There's Miss Stowell. She's supposed to be accomplished. Miss Hartigan is mild-mannered. Miss Kenworthy's got that confident swag. And then there's Miss Berrigan, who stands out in a crowd, and she's really excited to just have her name get dropped in the pamphlet. Of course, all of this is being written by Penelope Featherington, who is entering her third season. And the prospects are still looking pretty grim. Just looks like she's destined to be a spinster. But as for the other house, the Bridgertons, they once again have somebody that they're debuting for the season. It's Francesca. And she is about as interested in getting debuted to society as Eloise was. All right, she's a little more interested, but not much. She doesn't think this is a big deal at all. As everybody prepares for that day, because it's the day that everybody presents themselves in front of the Queen, there is a returning Bridgerton who comes back. It's Polin. Fresh off of his travels and adventures, he's got a credible haircut and that look that says, yeah, I was on a ship, but I want to dock it in your harbor, if you know what I'm saying. He meets up with his family, and he, along with the rest of the Bridgertons, head on over to the palace so that they can see Francesca debut herself for the Queen. When it comes time, though, for Francesca to go in front of the Queen is not impressed. I mean, it says it in her face. But then again, the Queen hasn't been impressed with anybody so far. She looks at this season as pretty dull for the rookies. Now, one family that noticeably isn't there is the Featheringtons, because the only girl that they have who is unmarried is Penelope. They're all sitting back, and Penelope's sisters are just excited about the fact that they found husbands, and Lady Featherington is excited because now they're finally back in good standing with society. They paid off all their debts. Now, the story that she's going with is that the girl's Aunt Petunia died and left them a bunch of money, but Aunt Petunia was a spinster, and she didn't own a lot. Varley brings this up to Lady Featherington and says, are people really going to believe that? But Lady Featherington isn't worried. She says, yeah, I mean, for all they know, she was just keeping all of her money in the floorboards. She kind of brushes off Varley's thoughts because everybody's getting ready for the first gathering after the new debutantes are shown to society, or at least shown to the Queen. The Queen, though, is noticeably missing from this gathering. It's got just about all of the mothers wondering what the hell's happening here. It does get a little awkward at this gathering, though, when Penelope runs into Eloise for the first time. First time since they had their blow-up. Penelope spent all summer away. So neither of them really know what to do, and Eloise just grabs Cressida and says, hey, do you want to go get some lemonade? Which comes as a huge shock to Penelope. She can't believe that Eloise has befriended Cressida. But Penelope is the only one who's surprised, so is Eloise's family. Violet Bridgerton certainly doesn't understand it, and Colin certainly doesn't understand it either. Either way, though, no one's really interfering in it. They're just kind of letting Eloise pick her own friends for the time being until it becomes a problem. As Violet is discussing this with Kate, up walks Lady Danbury, and they question Lady Danbury on where the Queen is. And Lady Danbury admits that the Queen might have skipped this one because she's still feeling a certain way about, well, kind of messing up the diamond of the season last year. A little bit awkward to say in front of Kate, but Kate understands. The diamond of the season, though, might not be a girl. It might be a boy. It might be Colin Bridgerton. I mean, he has every single group of girls swooning over him. And this dude knows how to spit game. It becomes painfully obvious that if Colin Bridgerton wanted a wife, he would easily have one. One of the girls he walks up to, of course, is his friend Penelope. But Penelope is very cold to him and very standoffish. She has not forgotten about what she overheard in the garden last year. Colin tries to get into a conversation with Penelope about the whole Cressida and Eloise situation, but Penelope just puts a stop to it real quickly and walks off. She goes to meet up with her mother and sisters, who are currently being approached by a woman who starts to ask the girls when they're going to have kids, because now there needs to be a Lord Featherington. And the woman gets pretty rude when she says, let's hope that whoever lays claim to be the next Lord Featherington has more scruples. Or does being a thief run in the family? And Lady Featherington tries to shut her up by saying, well, in fact, there shall be no more laying claim. The last Lord Featherington actually wrote a document bequeathing the estate to my girls. just as soon as one of them produces an heir. Now, this is news to both Prudence and Philippa, and that's because she just made it up. But what this is going to kick off is a major baby race between the two. At this point, the Featherington women are making their way out of the party, and Penelope tries to include herself in this conversation, but her sisters laugh it off. And it doesn't help when her mom, getting in the carriage, turns to Penelope and says, well, at least I know that you'll always be there to take care of me. That's the last thing Penelope actually wants. It's at that moment that she decides this season needs to be different than the previous season. She cannot end up a spinster. The next day, she's going to go to the modiste and try to start planning for dresses. But the relationship between Penelope and Eloise is something that Polin can't ignore. He knows these two are best friends, and it's just so weird that his sister is now hanging out with Cressida. So he asks her about it. Eloise doesn't reveal the big secret about why their friendship broke up. She just says that they grew apart. Eloise has no interest in going deeper into that conversation. She has to go to the modiste with her mother and sister. And that's where she actually does run into Penelope again. And this time, they actually have a chance to talk. It's something that Penelope wants, but Eloise had really no interest in. Penelope apologizes to Eloise and also thanks her for not revealing the secret of who Whistledown is. At one point, she says to Eloise, you may not understand what I did, but I was only trying to protect. And Eloise cuts her off and says, no, I do not need your explanations. I kept your secret because I don't want to revisit the past. You've got your life, now I've got my life. Penelope starts to question Eloise on whether or not she's actually friends with Cressida, but Eloise just walks off, not answering the question. And the answer is yeah, they actually seem to be friends. Now, while the women were at the modistes and the dress shops, the men had gone to Will Mondrich's club. Will gets great news that day. A guy named Walter Dundas, who works for the Crown, is basically responsible for ensuring the lines of succession run smoothly within great families. Well, he shows up, and he gives the Mondriches, or I should say his son Nicholas, shocking news. He informs Will that Nicholas is now the Baron of Kent. They're moving to a really, really, really nice house. The Mondriches head off, but everybody else is getting ready for the first ball of the season. This is going to be one that the Queen does attend. Everybody recognizes that the season is off to a pretty dull start, but then it gets shaken up when Penelope arrives, and she looks incredible. She's no longer sporting these pink lemonade colors. She's wearing this green dress. Her hair looks great. I'm telling you right now, I'd probably hit on her. I would. And guys start to do that, but the problem is Penelope is just so awkward that she doesn't know how to handle herself. It's actually painful for her old friend Eloise to watch her interact with these guys because she's just not used to it and she doesn't know what to say. She has, though, gotten the attention of the Queen, who's noticed her, as has Polin. In fact, everybody's noticed her. She's not the only one who's a little bit uncomfortable at this thing. So is Francesca. As people are dancing around them, Francesca reveals to Penelope that she doesn't really like this because she feels like she's being inspected by guys, like she's a racehorse or something. Even though Penelope isn't comfortable in this situation either, she does give Francesca a nice little pep talk. And when a dude walks over and asks Francesca to dance, she accepts. But later in the night, Penelope does get approached by a guy named Lord Debling. He's very complimentary. It takes Penelope way off guard, but their conversation is being overheard by Cressida, who decides to do something super mean. She intentionally steps on Penelope's dress so that when Penelope moves, the dress rips. Penelope is completely embarrassed by the moment. She runs out of that place. Before she does, though, she catches eyes with Eloise, who immediately starts to apologize, but Penelope doesn't want to hear it because she feels like this is who Eloise wants to hang out with. Well, birds of a feather flock together. Penelope running out of the ball does catch the notice of Polin, who goes to check on her, and he's really confused on why Penelope's being so cold to him, and finally she comes out with it and says, I overheard you last year in the garden. I know what you said. You said you'd never call on me. You know, I expected people to say mean things about me, but not you. Obviously, Polin had no idea she overheard this. He's completely embarrassed, and now he feels like he lost one of his best friends. But Penelope's so pissed off at how the night went that she goes home and she writes the next edition of Whistledown, and it is not flattering for Colin Bridgerton. After writing it, Penelope decides to go to bed, and the next morning, her mother actually gets a visitor, and it's from Walter Dundas. He's got some questions about this recent letter that's popped up, claiming that the estate would go to one of her daughters once she produced a male heir. he thinks it's fishy. Without saying it, he basically says that he doesn't believe it. And if he finds out that it's forged before one of the Featherington girls has an heir, it's not going to be pretty for the Featheringtons. They're going to lose all their titles, their houses, the standing in society, everything. It's going to be really embarrassing for Lady Featherington and the rest of the girls. Lady Featherington wasn't the only Featherington woman to get a guest that day. While out in the garden, Penelope gets a guest, and it's Polin. He's come to apologize. He feels horrible about the comments last year. And he admits that, yeah, he has changed. He's not the man that he was last season, but he's certainly not ashamed of Penelope. In fact, it's the opposite. He seeks her out because he knows that she's going to lift his spirits. He starts bestowing a bunch of compliments on her and then says, "I'm proud to call you my very good friend." He realizes, though, that what she's looking for is a husband, so he wants to help her out. He wants to be her guru of game. He's going to teach her how to talk in a public setting to guys so that she can get a husband. He knows that with his help, she's going to do just fine this season. And by the time he leaves, Penelope's feeling way better about their relationship, but then she remembers what she wrote and she feels horrible about it. And when Polin gets back, it's Eloise who's already read the latest edition of Whistledown, and she shows him what Whistledown was writing about him. Now, Eloise never tells Polin who Whistledown really is, but Colin's pissed. And after what Whistledown did to Eloise the previous year, Polin vows that if he ever finds out who Whistledown is, he will ruin their life. Now, while Polin was making this bold proclamation, down the hall, Violet was discussing the upcoming season with Francesca and just making sure that she's going to be open to a relationship. And like anyone, Francesca wants what Anthony and Kate have. True love. But what they have is something else. I mean, they're banging each other's brains out, their love and life. And because Kate married Anthony, she's technically supposed to now be the Viscountess. But Violet has yet to move out, and she's dragging her feet, and Anthony's noticed this. So he tells Kate, look, I'm going to talk to my mom. I'm going to get her out of this house. But Kate stops him and says, no, why would you? Look, we have our whole lives to be this count, Viscountess, all that crap. Why don't we just extend the honeymoon? Let her stay. Let her do what she enjoys doing. And, we'll continue to do stuff to each other. Adult stuff. Fun stuff. With our mouths. In episode 2, Eloise, Benedict, and Polin all head to the park. And they're all discussing the season. Eloise not really wanting to get back into it, but she did promise Anthony that she would at least try. Polin, meanwhile, agreed to meet up with Penelope. This is going to be their first lesson. He is a little surprised that she still wants his advice, especially after what Whistledown wrote about him, but Penelope just brushes that aside and says she's an idiot. She doesn't know what the hell she's talking about. Now that she's agreed, he wants to see her skills in action because, as he puts it, men are pretty simple creatures. He feels like this should be pretty quick. The problem is when Penelope walks up to a group of guys, she just looks flustered. She's uncomfortable. Yeah, the first lesson doesn't go great. When she gets home, she heads right up to bed, and her mother doesn't even notice because what her mother's concerned with is what Mr. Dundas talked about. She's concerned that her 2 daughters who are married off are just dragging their feet. She's trying to prompt both of them to, get on with it, make a baby. So all of this gets swept under the rug, the fact that she forged this letter. But it just doesn't seem like either Philippa or Prudence are really picking up on what she's talking about. Penelope has no idea about any of this, and the next day when she wakes up, she heads to her second lesson with Polin, although she does tell Polin, look, if I'm a lost cause, I won't take offense to it. We can just stop all this. But Polin doesn't think she's a lost cause. He thinks that not only is she teachable, she will figure out how to spit game. He knows that deep down, she's a very interesting person who has a lot to offer. She's just too self-conscious. He knows that in order to get the best out of her, she needs to be comfortable. So he says, well, what's the one thing in the world that makes you the most comfortable? And she tells him, it used to be Sunday teas at Bridgerton House, but that's not really an option anymore because of the relationship with Eloise. She always felt like that was the one place she could go and be herself without any repercussions, but unfortunately, it's not really a possibility. Polin does ask her what happened between you and my sister, but Penelope decides to not answer the question and just tells him that she has to get back before the two are, quote, noticed together. And as for Eloise, well, she's busy the next day heading to the Modiste with her mother and Francesca because they got great news from Lady Danbury. Lady Danbury convinced the Queen that because this season has been off to a very dull start and it's been noticed by Lady Whistledown, What the queen should do is open up this, quote, Diamond of the Season award that really is all but made up. Well, she should open it up to everybody that's available, not just newcomers. And that's going to cause a mad dash with all the girls to catch the queen's notice. Those that have been brought into society already and those that are just being brought in. For Eloise, she wants no parts of this at all. She debuted in the season last year. She didn't find a match, and she's comfortable with that, no matter what she told Anthony. And she feels like Francesca probably feels the same way, but Francesca corrects her and says, despite what you think, I actually do want to find a husband. That's the one thing about this whole season that is actually appealing to me. I just want to do it before the queen is interested in me. That's when Eloise comes up with a great idea. Spread word around town that the queen has opened this thing up so that all the other girls will be interested. They'll eventually catch the queen's eye before the queen can even look at Francesca or Eloise, and they don't have to worry about it. But while they were gone at the Modiste, back at Bridgerton house, Penelope showed up. She was called upon by Colin, and she thought that Colin merely wanted a ride. They would go somewhere else for the next lesson, but Colin says, no, we're doing it here, which does make Penelope very uncomfortable. But Colin reassures her, my sister's not here. Don't worry. No one's going to see you. It's just me and you. We need to do the lesson here. He goes to the drawing room of the Bridgerton house, and the lesson's going to be pretending like they're at a ball. He brought her there because she did say she was comfortable, but in this scenario he's laid out, she's anything but. Especially when he wants to pretend to be one of her suitors. He wants her to approach him and basically hit on him, which she does a really good job at because everything she says she actually believes. It's a tad bit awkward. She brushes it off like she didn't actually mean it directed towards him, but we all know it was. And that's when they hear some commotion from the outside. And it's Eloise, Francesca, their mother. They've all returned, which means that Penelope needs to go hide in another room so that she's not seen. As she's hiding in the room that Colin put her in, she notices that Colin's journal is open. And curiosity gets the best of her. She starts reading it. It's from his travels abroad to Paris. And, well, it's a little spicy. And as she's getting into the really good stuff, Colin walks in and catches her. And he's pissed. He doesn't want her reading it. He doesn't want anyone reading it. It's not for anyone's eyes but his own. And even though she apologizes, he's still pissed off about it. When he goes to grab it, he knocks over a light that breaks. Glass is everywhere. And when he goes to pick up the glass, he cuts his hand pretty good. And I'm just going to say it. He cuts his hand on the palm of it. I don't know who taught this guy how to pick up glass, but it's a very weird cut. Anyway, it's bleeding profusely. Penelope, though, does feel really bad about it, and he does accept her help to bandage it up. With Colin's hand bandaged up, she knows she has to get out of there, so she starts to make a mad dash to the exit. But right before she does leave, she ends up getting caught by Eloise. It's right down the hall. They make eye contact, and it is awkward, but Penelope gets out of there. It's something that Eloise does bring up to Colin as the two head to the ball that night. And Colin does apologize for it, but he says to her, I just don't know how to act because I don't know what happened between you two. Eloise sticks with her original story, that they just grew apart. She doesn't wish for Penelope to be friendless. She realizes that Colin might be her only friend at this point. She just doesn't want to see her at her house. Eloise, though, does ask Colin how she's doing. And Colin says she's doing great. She's actually looking to seek a husband, which comes as a surprise to Eloise because they always talked about growing old together and being spinsters. But Colin tells his sister that Penelope's enlisted him to teach her the ropes on how to get a husband. So that's one of the main reasons he's going to this ball today, to help her out. A short time later, they arrive at the ball, and word has certainly gotten around that the queen has opened this competition up. She is being flooded with girls just trying to get her attention. Violet Bridgerton would love for one of her daughters to be that, but neither of them are interested. When Violet brings it up to Francesca especially, Francesca says, yeah, I think it can wait. I remember Lady Danbury saying that there was a suitor who was really interested in music. Can I meet him? Because music is one of Francesca's passions. While the Bridgerton women, though, mingle through the crowd and try to find husbands, the Bridgerton guys, i.e. Colin and Benedict, they're still catching a lot of flies because they are as sweet as honey. Women continue to come up to them trying to get their attention. Colin, however, turns all these girls down because the only reason he's shown up is to help out Penelope. The first thing Penelope does, though, when she sees Colin is apologize once again for reading his stuff, but She does compliment him and say that it's really good writing and she'd love to read more of it because he's just amazing at it. And Colin thinks and says, okay, I'll tell you what. I will consider that if you speak to one lord tonight. Penelope looks around the room. She picks one guy. She walks up to him. And it just so happens that she says the wrong thing to this guy. He ends up running away crying. But it's a moment that both her and Colin can just laugh about. Penelope actually comes up in conversation, though, with Cressida and Eloise. With Cressida becoming Eloise's new best friend, she feels like she can confide in her about the struggles that are going on with her and Penelope. She tells Cressida how Penelope was at her house that day. It was awkward. And when Cressida points out that Penelope is chatting a lot with her brother, Eloise corrects her and says, actually, my brother's helping her try to find a husband this season. Now, two new guests to this ball are the Mondriches. With Alice and Will's child now having that new status in that new sweet house, they get invited to these sort of things. But for Will, he still feels a little bit out of place. And for Alice, she's growing accustomed to this new lifestyle that is just different from their old one. For example, they're not supposed to sleep in the same bedroom. It's weird. But Benedict Bridgerton is more than happy to show Will and Alice around and show them kind of the lay of the land. And the one lesson he teaches them is, you guys are already married, so a lot of these rules don't apply. Do whatever you want. Drink as much as you want. Dance as much as you want. Doesn't matter. Have fun. Enjoy it. The big commotion, though, at this ball is the fact that the Queen has seen enough. She turns to Lady Danbury. She says, yeah, I'm about to head out. And Lady Danbury wants what's best for the Bridgertons. She's really good friends with Violet. She knows how beautiful and how much Francesca has to offer. She knows that Francesca could be the diamond of the season. It's just Francesca isn't interested in it. So it's basically up to Lady Bridgerton and Lady Danbury to kind of push the Queen to notice her. And right before the Queen does take off, Lady Danbury takes the Queen down the hall where she overhears a piano player. And the piano player is Francesca, crushing it. It has the Queen seeing Francesca in a completely new light. And it seems like when the Queen does head out, that Francesca is currently the lead to be the diamond of the season. One girl, though, that didn't get the Queen's attention this time around was Penelope. She does, however, catch the eye of a guy named Lord Remington, and the two start chatting it up, and turns out they have a ton in common. They're both readers. So after the conversation, Penelope excitedly goes over to Colin and says, he's going to call on me tomorrow. Colin's excited for her, and after this 4-minute-long conversation with Lord Remington, Penelope is smitten hard. But that is when disaster strikes. Because word has gotten around to the partygoers that Colin Bridgerton is helping Penelope find a husband. And even though this shouldn't be that big of a deal, it is. It's extremely embarrassing for Penelope. It's also embarrassing for Colin. Suddenly, everybody's looking at Penelope, and they're just mocking her. And it forces Penelope to flee the ball again. Two Bridgertons chase after Penelope to make sure she's okay, Colin being the one and Eloise being the other. But the two end up meeting up on the steps, and Colin asks Eloise, did you tell anybody that I was helping her? And she starts kind of beating around the bush a little bit, but later admits, well, I told Cressida in confidence. And Colin loses it on her. He doesn't understand why Eloise is friends with Cressida instead of Penelope. And Eloise continues to keep her mouth shut on what happened between her and Penelope. That night when Penelope gets home, she writes the next edition of Whistle Down, and she has to unfortunately put herself in it. As for her sisters, they get to work trying to have a baby. And as for the Mondriches, they also decide that, you know what, we're not going to follow by these rules. We're not sleeping in separate beds. That's dumb. We're going to sleep with each other because we're adults. The next day, the edition of Whistle Down comes out, and everybody's reading it. And for Eloise, she is a little surprised that Penelope put herself in it. But she's more upset with Cressida. And she confronts Cressida about what she said to her, because she told her in confidence. And Cressida blabbed her big mouth again, resulting in embarrassment for her old friend. But it turns out that Eloise was actually the idiot in the situation, because Cressida didn't tell anybody. No, in fact, it was Eloise and her big mouth. She was saying it so loud that other women heard it. Cressida, when asked if she had any gossip, actually kept her mouth shut for once. So Eloise is left there with stones and a broken glass house. As for Penelope, well, she's dealing with the embarrassment of Whistledown coming out, especially when her mom comes up to her and says how embarrassing the moment is. Her mom still has no idea that she is Whistledown. Lady Featherington starts to tell Penelope that she needs to accept the fact she's not going to marry. And then she realizes what a mean thing that is to say, so she starts to walk it back, but the damage is done. Now, for Penelope, all she wants to do is sit in the house all day and kind of wallow. And you can't even blame her. Late at night, though, she does get a visitor, and it's Polin. Polin wants to check in on her, and she's just embarrassed. She starts beating herself up, calling her sad and stupid, thinking that she had a chance at love, and Polin does his best to talk her out of that line of thinking, but Penelope doesn't really want to hear it at the moment. She does, however, ask something of Polin. She wants a kiss. And Polin doesn't really want to, but she starts to explain to him that she could die tomorrow. And she's never kissed anybody, and she doesn't want to die never having kissed anybody. And it looks more and more likely that she's going to end up alone for the rest of her life. So she just wants to know what it feels like. Polin reluctantly agrees to this. He goes in and he kisses her. And afterwards, she runs back in the house. But Polin, it seems like he's felt something with that kiss. In episode 3, when Polin wakes up the next morning, he's a little frazzled because he had a dream about kissing Penelope. It's gotten that deep. It gets even more awkward when he goes to meet his family in the family room, and Hyacinth tells him that what he did for Penelope was really noble, and she's really lucky to have a friend like him. And he starts blurting out, yes, that's right, we are friends. We are only friends. It's just awkward. But for Violet, she's not even paying it any attention because what she's focused on is the fact that the Queen has seemingly granted her approval upon Francesca, which means that Francesca's going to have her pick of the litter when it comes to suitors. She's going to be able to choose the best guy. And even though Francesca has really no interest in being the diamond of the season, it seems like she's going to be. And in fact, over at the castle, the Queen and Lady Danbury are already planning on who they'll match up Francesca with. It can't just be any schlub. It's got to be a noble person. Now, over at the Featherington household, the big topic of conversation continues to be both daughters getting pregnant. But one of the girls gets a visitor, and it's Penelope. And when she goes downstairs, she's pretty surprised because it's Eloise. The first thing Eloise does is address what Whistledown wrote about Penelope. She thought it was pretty harsh. And Penelope tells Eloise it would be fishy if she didn't write about it. But what Eloise really came to do was apologize and own up to the fact that the word getting out about her and Polin was because she blabbed about it. It wasn't intentional, but it happened. Penelope accepts the apology and invites her friend inside. She's just happy that maybe they can rekindle this thing, but Eloise says, no, I have to go meet a friend, but I do hope you find what you're looking for this season. And then she takes off. At this stage, Penelope is finally ready to head out to society. It's been a couple days. She's ready to finally be seen, even though she's still getting a lot of stares. While out walking in the park, she ends up running into Polin, and they have a secret conversation thanks to Weeping Willow. But the entire conversation is really, really awkward. Penelope saying we can't continue the lessons, Polin saying he agrees, but asking Penelope why. She tries to explain that she already embarrassed herself, and if it continues, she'll embarrass his family as well, and he says he understands, but it's pretty clear he wants the lessons to continue. All of it is just really awkward. Eventually, this awkward conversation does end because they do realize that if they are seen together, it's probably going to be the talk of the next edition of Whistledown. Penelope decides to attend the ball that night, which is a big deal. This is the first ball she's attending since, well, everybody found out about her and Polin. And though a few eyes will be on her, most of the women's eyes are on Lord Debling. He's the most eligible bachelor. He's finally looking for a wife, but he's a bit bizarre. He's a vegetarian. He likes to travel. He's big into nature and hunting and all of that. And one girl who has Debling in her sights is Cressida. And it's not even like Cressida really wants the guy. It's more her mother pushing her. Her mother tries to explain that if she doesn't marry this season, well, Daddy's going to probably pull all funding. He's already pretty pissed off, and eventually Daddy and Mommy are going to have to find Cressida a husband, and they don't want to do that. So go, woo this Debling guy. And Cressida does try, but initially she fails because she's not anything like Debling. One of the problems is she's just trying too hard. Cressida, however, is going to have some competition, and it's surprising competition. It is Penelope. Because Lord Debling walks up to her, and she's very surprised at this, and finds out that Lord Debling does not read Lady Whistledown. He doesn't really care for it. When Penelope tells Lord Debling what she did, he's actually impressed, because she did something different. He likes that. She didn't conform to society, because he feels like he doesn't conform to society. The more they chat, the more Lord Debling likes her because she is a free thinker. And even though he's not supposed to really be helping out, the whole time, Polin has his eyes on Penelope. The day after the ball, Cressida and Eloise get together, and Cressida informs Eloise that she's planning on marrying Lord Debling, even though Debling doesn't know that yet. And Eloise is a little surprised because Lord Debling is so different than Cressida. The things he likes, she hates. But also with the fact that Lord Debling was spending a lot of time talking to Penelope. And Cressida laughs at that. She doesn't look at Penelope as a threat at all. But she does know that because of the differences of her and Lord Debling, she's going to need Eloise's help. And Eloise says, all right, I'll help you out. I'll inform you on some nature stuff so you don't sound like an idiot. Most of the town, though, is getting really excited for a balloon. Folks, this is one of those episodes that makes you appreciate the era that we live in. Like when you can't find anything to watch on Netflix or Hulu or Apple or HBO. These people, they literally came from all over to look at a hot air balloon and watch it go into the sky. That's their entertainment. But all the bigwigs show up for this event. And by the way, that includes the Queen. And this will be the event where the Queen introduces Francesca to her hand-picked suitor. It's a guy named Lord Semidani from Vienna. He seems perfect, but when he and Francesca actually talk about what they both want for their lives, it's completely different. As for another Bridgerton who's single, and this time I'm talking about Benedict, he's been trying to avoid this girl that he danced with since he danced with her because she became a little clingy. When he sees her at the event, he ducks into one of the tents and he starts overhearing this lecture on hot air balloons. While in the tent, he makes a really stupid comment, thinking that he's only being in earshot of men, and he realizes, oh crap, I'm not in earshot of men. No, in fact, he's within earshot of a woman, an attractive woman at that. Her name is Lady Tilly Arnold, and she is a bad bitch, because women don't really go to these things, but not only does she go to attend it, she basically yells at all the guys for being judgmental towards the speaker. The fact that she has this air of confidence has Benedict a little intimidated. Now outside this tent, the battle for Lord Debling rages on. He was talking to Cressida, but Lord Debling then called over Penelope. And both Penelope and Cressida start going back and forth trying to convince Lord Debling that they're better suited for him by just bringing up stuff like, I like grass, and I like this bird. And just like the previous night, Colin Bridgerton has his eyes on the conversation. But then disaster kind of strikes because the hot air balloon starts taking off a little bit. It gets really windy and blustery, and Colin Bridgerton, along with Benedict and a few others, have to wrangle this thing back in. But the hot air balloon, when it was taking off, was headed right for Penelope, and Lord Debling dove to save her, or at least shield her from a blow. It was very noble and chivalrous, but it's something that Cressida couldn't let go. So when Lord Debling started walking back, Cressida acted like she hurt her ankle so that Lord Debling would pay her more attention. The heroics of Lord Debling, though, are completely overshadowed by what Colin, Benedict, and the rest of the guys did by reeling in this balloon in enough time for the guy who actually owns the balloon to take off in it. I mean, you would think that Colin saved a bunch of puppies from a burning building the way people are acting towards him now. Even at that night's ball, a lot of people are still focused on what the guys did. But for Violet, she's just focused on one thing. The fact that once again, it looks like she has a daughter who's a diamond of the season. And that's when Violet drops a glove. And you know what happens when a girl drops a glove? A guy picks it up. And the guy who picks up her glove, she's never seen before, but he's got this great bald head and this facial hair and eyes, and he's even got a nose. I mean, Violet's smitten a little bit, but she's got to get back on track because, her daughter and marriage and stuff. So she thanks this mystery man for picking up her glove, and then she heads into the ball. Turns out, though, they wouldn't be strangers for long because later in the night, as Violet is looking for Francesca, who went out to the garden and just get some fresh air, that mystery man returns. He shows up and they start talking about how nerve-wracking it is to marry off daughters because he has daughters of his own, but they've all married off, flown the nest, yada, yada, yada. But they start bonding over this. That's when Lady Danbury interrupts this conversation because it turns out this mystery man is named Marcus, and he's Lady Danbury's brother. And Lady Danbury is not all that thrilled that he's come into town. And yet, even though it's her friend's brother, I mean, her friend did sleep with her dad, so maybe even up the score a little bit. Violet, though, isn't the only one to have an interesting interaction. Benedict once again runs into Lady Tilly Arnold. But this time, Lady Tilly Arnold is not really combative. In fact, she tells Benedict that she was impressed with what he did, the heroics with the hot air balloon. And then she informs him that she's a widower. The two end up going to the dance floor and dancing, but this is the first girl that might have met Benedict's match. But the battle for Lord Debling continues to rage on at this ball, and Cressida strikes the first blow. She starts talking to Lord Debling, trying to schmooze him a little bit, and finally Penelope is able to get him alone, and she admits, look, earlier today I wasn't myself. I mean, I was saying things like, I love grass, and I don't mind grass, but in all honesty, I'm a homebody. I like to stay indoors, I like to read books, that's who I am. And to her surprise, Lord Debling laughs and says, good. I mean, I'm not looking for someone just like me. What he wants is to be with somebody who knows exactly who they are and embraces their uniqueness. And while Lord Debling was planning on getting lemonade for Cressida, he hands that lemonade over to Penelope and the two continue to talk. And this isn't lost on Cressida, who is waiting for that lemonade along with Eloise. Eloise tries to console her friend on the fact that she might be losing this battle to Penelope, but it doesn't help any. But little does Cressida know that there might be a battle going on for Penelope, and it's between Lord Debling and Colin. Colin's been watching Penelope all night. At one point, he finds his mother and he asks, hey, when you and Dad got together, you said the most important thing was friendship. How did you go from the friend stage to becoming lovers? And she tells him, your dad finally got the courage to tell me how he felt. Colin tries to play this off like he was just curious, but Violet can tell exactly who Colin's talking about. And Colin decides, you know what? All right, it's time. It's time I go over to Penelope and tell her maybe we should be more than friends. Unfortunately, what Colin wasn't banking on was that Lord Debling already signed her dance card. Colin can't get the words out in enough time, and Debling comes over and grabs Penelope and escorts her on the dance floor. In episode 4, about a week later, Lord Debling ends up calling on Penelope, which is a huge deal. It's even shocking to her family. They can't believe that somehow she has snagged the #1 bachelor on the market, but she seemingly has. During calling hour, there's another surprising person that shows up at a woman's door. It's Benedict. He shows up at Lady Arnold's house looking to call upon her, but she tells him, I don't want to be called upon. No, she just wants to have sex with him, I assume, because they go up to her bedroom and they start hooking up. It's cool. And then finally over at the Bridgerton household, the morning starts out with a conversation between Colin and his mother. She knows that when Colin asked about friends becoming lovers of the day, there was a reason for it. She figures that it probably had to do with Penelope. So she just asks him, was there a reason behind that? Trying to pry that story out of him. But he says, no, I was just being speculative, that's all. Violet's not really going to press the issue, so she just moves on. She moves on to Francesca's calling hour. Violet is preparing for Lord Samadani to call upon Francesca, but Francesca does warn her mother, hey, it's not a given. They then hear, though, that there is somebody to call upon Francesca, and it's a guy named John Sterling, who's the Earl of Kilmartin. It's not Lord Samadani, but John Sterling had a really nice conversation with Francesca the other night when she stepped out to get some fresh air. Well, I mean, conversation, it really wasn't a conversation. They literally didn't say many words to each other. But Francesca definitely gets a smile on her face when he shows up. And just like the other night, they just sit there and they don't say a word. It's pretty weird. Even her family is kind of looking from a distance going, what the hell is going on here? But then that all gets broken up when Lord Samadani does show up. And it's a little awkward for Lord Kilmartin, but he understands, and he steps out to let Lord Samadani have his moment with Francesca. Once calling hour is over, all of the families are going to gather to go to this art gallery exhibit during the day. It's really another chance for women and men of society to mingle about each other and hopefully find a match. One of those women is Penelope, but when she dare grab a book and start looking at it, because this art exhibit is seemingly at someone's house, her mother comes over and yells at her. Her mother, seeing the opportunity that Penelope has to marry Lord Debling and have a good life for herself, doesn't want Penelope squandering it. Her advice to Penelope is to play dumb and have the men mansplain everything to her. And when Lord Debling does interrupt this conversation, it gets weird because Lord Debling asks her, hey, are you reading the fabled Northwest Passage? Penelope starts to answer, yeah, I actually was. I find it But Lady Featherington cuts her off and just says she finds it terribly confusing. We can't understand it. Could you explain it to us? And obviously that's embarrassing for Penelope, who can read and does understand all of it. Lady Featherington does end up moving aside to let Penelope actually have a conversation with Lord Debling, but as the two are talking, that's when the Bridgertons show up, and Colin right away notices that his friend Penelope is chatting it up with Lord Debling, and she's smiling a lot. But Colin isn't the only one who's a little perturbed by this potential relationship. Another eagle-eyed partygoer is Cressida. She really thought she had a chance with Lord Debling, and now she's worried that she's going to be married off to one of her father's friends who's old and decrepit. What both Cressida and Colin aren't aware of is just how good the conversation between Penelope and Lord Debling is going. It's going so well that Lord Debling hints at proposing to Penelope, and if she would accept or not. And she doesn't really give an answer. But she is very excited over the prospect of becoming Lady Debling. It looks like Penelope has won the battle for Lord Debling, and Cressida is going to have to wait for somebody else. But the next day, the calling hour does not go as expected. She does have somebody call upon her, but it's Eloise. And that really pisses off Cressida's parents. So much so that as Eloise is leaving, she overhears her dad say, "You got to stop hanging out with that Bridgerton girl." Because they desperately want their daughter to marry off. It's not like Cressida doesn't want that too, but she also doesn't want to lose her only friend. As for Eloise's mother and sister, Francesca, they're walking the streets and discussing the next night's ball and Lord Semidani and whether there's real interest there when Francesca notices that Lord Kilmartin is a few feet away, so she stops him. She questions him about why he left so abruptly the other morning, but he says, "You had another caller?" At one point in this awkward interaction, they overhear somebody playing a fiddle, and when Lord Kilmartin says, "Man, it's really enjoyable music, don't you think?" Francesca says, "Actually, no. The pace is too fickle. When you think you're starting to comprehend the melody, the song is over. A song like this would be far better if it were played in 3/4, so one could, in fact, feel the music." And then, just like the other day, Lord Kilmartin excuses himself and walks away, leaving both Bridgerton women kind of confused at his behavior. The big moment of that day, though, comes with the Featherington household, when Lord Debling shows up, but he doesn't really meet with Penelope. He meets with Lady Featherington to ask for Penelope's hand in marriage. And Lady Featherington is thrilled with Penelope. She can't believe that she accomplished this feat. But just as Lady Featherington is getting really excited about the prospects of her daughter marrying Debling, Penelope says, "I haven't said yes yet." And Lady Featherington kind of laughs at her and says, What? This guy's perfect. Like, what do you want?" But Penelope doesn't know how to answer that question. And that's when her mother looks at her and says, "Oh, come on. Don't tell me you're holding out for love. Penelope, love is make-believe. It's only in storybooks. This is why I didn't want you reading. You know what's romantic? Security. Stability. That's Lord Debling. Be smart, and if you're not going to be, then I'll be it for you." Penelope is planning on seeing Lord Debling later that night at that night's ball. Well, one person who might not be there is Colin. He comes downstairs and tells his mother, "Yeah, I'm not feeling that great." And that's because Colin's hungover. He spent most of the previous day at a brothel. In a last-ditch effort to get him to show up, because, after all, a mother knows what's going on, Violet says to him, "It'd be a shame if you missed the fruits of your labor. I hear Penelope may be getting proposed to tonight." Lady Featherington can't stop telling anyone who will listen. And Colin can't believe that Penelope's getting proposed to that quickly, but it does give him food for thought. Violet, Francesca, and Eloise then head to that night's ball, where Violet is just laser focused on everything Francesca is doing. So much so that when Marcus, or I should say Lord Anderson, comes over to give her some cake, she says, "I have no appetite." But Lord Anderson has some appetite for that ass. The two start chatting it up, and at one point Violet mentions how shaping society is one of Lady Danbury's pastimes, and that's surprising to Marcus, because Marcus and Lady Danbury don't have a great relationship. They're not very close. Marcus showing up at all has really annoyed Lady Danbury. He asks Violet who's the target this time, and Violet says, "It's my daughter, Francesca." But I just don't know that she's found that spark yet. He then brings up his relationship with his wife, how it was arranged, but he ended up finding that spark, and Violet brings up that her marriage was a love marriage. And Marcus comments that he was always jealous of that. He always wanted a love marriage. But those two aren't the only ones that are watching Francesca and Lord Semidani dance. The Queen, along with Lady Danbury, and Alice Mondrich are also watching from the balcony. The Queen is so invested in this marriage because if the, quote, Diamond of the Season marries who she handpicked for the Diamond of the Season, it'll look favorably in the next edition of Whistledown. When the conversation dies down a little bit, Alice turns to Lady Danbury and says, "Hey, I really appreciate you taking the time to invite me up here. I didn't want to miss another ball, especially showing up solo." And the reason why Alice has shown up by herself is because Will is busy tending to his club, which is really looked at as a no-no. Now that he's a member of society, he's not supposed to be working. He's supposed to hire people to do that. But Will literally enjoys working at the club. That's the problem. And Lady Danbury has to tell Alice, you got to convince him to do something else because the Queen is not going to look favorably on Will working at a club now that he has this title. So Alice is going to have to figure out something. After this conversation with Alice, though, Lady Danbury looks down and she sees that her brother is talking to Violet, so she decides to head for the door. As she's trying to leave, though, Marcus ends up flagging her down and says, "Where are you going?" Lady Danbury explains that everything's going well. The Queen is satisfied. She's going to head home for the night. And Marcus asks her, "If you're done meddling, then can I be your next target? I do hear you're something of a molder of society." And Marcus has shown back up in town because he is looking for a new wife. But Lady Danbury shuts down that idea real quick and in rude fashion. She's not trying to help out her brother, especially hook up with Violet Bridgerton. She then heads home. Now, the Queen's Diamond of the Season has been spending most of the night with Lord Semidani, but that doesn't stop Francesca from talking to Lord Kilmartin at the ball. Francesca, though, is kind of annoyed with Kilmartin. She can't quite figure him out. He shows up, he doesn't talk, he leaves. And she doesn't mind the not talking part, but the leaving abruptly part, she's annoyed with. And Lord Kilmartin can figure that out, so he says, "You got to forgive me for rushing off, but I wanted to get you this." And he hands her a music scroll. And what the music is from is the fiddler from the other day that was playing. He had the music changed exactly how she thought it should be. Kilmartin goes on to tell her that he's not a man of many words, but what he does believe in is the power of a gesture. And that gesture seems to work because Francesca is beaming. She's so excited to get this gesture that she wants to leave early to go play it at home, which takes Violet completely off guard, and it also takes Lord Semidani off guard. But the person that pisses off the most is the Queen. The Queen can't figure out what the hell's going on. Now, not too far away from the Queen, in another booth, is Eloise, trying to avoid everybody. And Cressida shows up, trying to chat with her friend, but Eloise says, "Well, are you sure that you should be here? I mean, I am that Bridgerton girl." And Cressida apologizes for what her father said. Cressida has no plans on not hanging out with Eloise. A later rival to this party is going to be Eloise's brother, Colin, who on second thought decided to show up at the party because he couldn't live with himself knowing that Penelope has gotten engaged and he didn't get a chance to tell Penelope how he felt. Colin shows up and completely interrupts a dance with Debling and Penelope, which leaves Debling a little surprised, and that's when Cressida swoops in to steal that dance, seeing her opportunity. And at first, Colin is just trying to talk Penelope out of marrying Lord Debling because she barely knows him. And Penelope kind of gives Colin the same spiel that her mother gave her earlier in the day. The conversation is very contentious, and when the dance ends, Lord Debling starts heading for the exit, ignoring Penelope altogether, and Penelope kind of yells at Colin while chasing after Lord Debling. When she finally catches up to him, Lord Debling is not planning on proposing. Because after having a quick conversation with Cressida, he's finally figured it out. All week, he's noticed that Penelope is searching for somebody, and now he realizes that somebody is Colin Bridgerton. He was told that Penelope reads from this window. Well, he found out that across the street is the Bridgerton household. It's pretty clear that Penelope has feelings for Colin Bridgerton. Debling tells her that he's going to be gone for 3 years, so it's important that he make a match with somebody whose affections are not already engaged elsewhere. He ends the conversation by telling her that whatever she's searching for, he hopes she finds it, and he leaves. And he's replaced by Lady Featherington, who right away says, "What have you done?" And Penelope is so turned off by that question, because it's clear to her that the only value she has to her mother is an engagement ring on her finger. For the third time this season, Penelope runs out of a ball and finds a carriage to get into. Only this time, she's joined by Colin Bridgerton. At first, the conversation's contentious, but when he finds out that Lord Debling didn't propose, it opens the door for Colin to tell Penelope how he feels. The two hook up, they kiss. A hand goes under her dress. She makes this face that I make when a place has s'mores ice cream. It's rare, but it's delicious. The two finally have told each other how they feel, and when they arrive at the Bridgerton house, Colin gets out and he turns to Penelope and says, "Well, are you going to marry me or not?" And Penelope is elated. In episode 5, Colin and Penelope rush into the Bridgerton household, and Colin announces, "We are engaged." And all of the Bridgertons, especially Hyacinth, they're pumped. Except Eloise. She's pissed. She's hurt. You can see it in her face. She storms out of the room. And Penelope goes to chase after her because she does want to remain friends with Eloise, even though Eloise is still mad at her. And Eloise isn't so much mad about the Whistledown thing. She feels like Penelope had just played her this entire time, as if Penelope was only friends with Eloise to get to her brother. She had no idea that Penelope even had feelings for Colin in the first place, so to Eloise, this is yet another example of betrayal. And what she's really concerned about is the fact that her brother will eventually find out who Whistledown is. And as she tells Penelope, "Until my brother finds out the real you, he can't possibly love you." Penelope knows that deep down, Eloise is correct. She needs to tell Colin, but she just begs for a little bit of time to find the right moment to do so. When Penelope goes home that night, though, Eloise isn't even on her mind. She just can't wait to write the next edition of Whistledown to announce the engagement of Penelope Featherington and Colin Bridgerton. Whistledown is actually how Benedict found out because he had stayed the night at Lady Arnold's place. But he wasn't the only Bridgerton guy that was out of the loop for the engagement announcement. Anthony had returned home with Kate, and he's got really exciting news. Kate's pregnant. But when he walks in the house, everybody's excited because the big news, at least in their mind, is the fact that Colin is engaged. And not wanting to steal Colin's moment, Kate and Anthony decide, okay, we're gonna just chill on announcing and trying to steal his shine. The engagement announcement, though, does come as a big surprise to Anthony. He's really surprised, actually. Anthony wants to make sure that his brother is making sound decisions, so he, along with Benedict, take Colin over to Mondrich's club, and they just sit him down and make sure that all of this isn't coming so quickly. And Colin explains that while it seems like it's coming quickly, it's really not. He's known Penelope for years. He always felt something for her, he just didn't realize what that was until recently. But no, he's of sound mind. Whistledown, by the way, is also how the Featheringtons found out about this engagement, and it doesn't sit well with Lady Featherington. She's pissed. She's pissed off because in her eyes, her daughter squandered a golden opportunity with Lord Debling. And quite frankly, she can't understand this relationship between Penelope and Colin. She starts browbeating Penelope while also trashing the Bridgerton name. And she feels like Penelope must have entrapped Colin, but that's when Colin storms in and interrupts all of this, putting a stop to it. Sticking up for Penelope and telling Portia to basically shut up because she doesn't know what she's talking about. It is a love marriage. He does love Penelope. She didn't entrap him. He's doing this because he wants to, and nothing more. And it's pretty clear to Colin that Portia doesn't see in Penelope what he does, which is an amazing person. And then he takes Penelope out of there. He takes Penelope to where they are going to live. He starts showing her a bunch of things, but she's just in awe. And not at the house. She's in awe because she's never had anybody in her life stick up for her the way that Colin just did. She's flat out infatuated with him at this point. And that's when, even though they're not supposed to, the fire burns for each other. And they start stripping down clothes, taking off pantaloons. Corsets fly off, and Colin Bridgerton takes Penelope Featherington's virginity. It's hot, yet for her, it's pretty painful. Because, it's the first time. Though, unlike my first time, there's no crying and apologizing. Anyway, while Colin was banging Penelope's brains out, back at the Bridgerton household, Penelope's old best friend Eloise is just sitting and having a think. And that's when Kate decides to intervene. Kate's trying to be the Viscountess now that she's back, planning some things, but she's also a sister-in-law, and she can see when Eloise is being bothered by something, so she goes to have a talk with her. Eloise tells Kate that, she's been thinking about Penelope, and she's not surprised that she kept a secret. She's done that before, but What she's surprised about is the fact that it's about Colin. But what also hurts is the fact that everybody's pairing off and she's once again alone. Kate's advice to Eloise is tell Colin how you feel, tell him why you're pissed off, because eventually it'll help. A little while later, Colin and Penelope are heading back to Bridgerton House, or Featherington House, they live right across the street from each other, when they notice a commotion in the street. A bunch of the Queen's men are handing out pamphlets, and Colin decides to stop and grab one, and that's when Penelope's world comes crashing down. Because the Queen has decided to take action against Lady Whistledown. The Queen has always had this love-hate relationship with Whistledown, this cat-mouse game that they play. The Queen actually loves Lady Whistledown and her drama, but she does hate the fact she doesn't know who she is. So she decided to put a bounty on Lady Whistledown's head. $5,000, which is a ton. And for Penelope, that's horrible news, because there are a couple people that do know who she is, and obviously Eloise is one of those people. She doesn't know who she's told. But it's also really bad news for Penelope when Colin, upon reading it, says, good. Lady Whistledown's going to get what she deserves. And as it turns out, Penelope was actually planning on telling Colin she was Whistledown until he stopped to read this pamphlet. Penelope's going to have to figure out what to do, and when they get home, they both go their separate ways. That night, Colin is approached by Eloise about the relationship with Penelope. And Eloise tells him how she feels, just like Kate advised her to. She's pissed off that this is happening, especially because Colin knows that Eloise and Penelope are at odds right now. And Colin apologizes, but he does tell his sister, I'm sorry, but I love her. He also asks for Eloise's blessing, which he doesn't wait for an answer because he wants to get her in a good mood, so he says, actually, I have a gift for you. And then he shows Eloise the Queen's pamphlet on the Whistledown bounty. Yes, the bounty is the talk of the town. It seems like everybody thinks that it's only a matter of time before Lady Whistledown is now found out. It's especially awkward for Penelope because that night her sisters are talking about how exactly you discovered Lady Whistledown. And by the way, I haven't mentioned this yet, but it's worth mentioning that both sisters think they are pregnant at this point. So they're just kind of sitting back and eating food. But as they're discussing how easy it would be for the Queen to figure out who Whistledown is, Penelope comes in the room and says, no, she's way too careful for that. The sisters, though, then ask Penelope, how exactly did you get Colin Bridgerton? And that's when, to the surprise of everybody, Portia walks in the room and says, no. We've been acting uncouth of late. We are Featherington ladies. We support each other, which they've never, ever done. But while Penelope was away, Portia had some time to think about the relationship. She had no idea it was a love marriage, and Varley did advise her that a match with the Bridgerton household would be good. So, in a matter of a couple hours, Portia Featherington has done a complete 180 on this relationship. While this might put Penelope in a good mood, it doesn't. She kind of sees right through it. She's also, though, heavily stressed out, and she retires to her room to write the latest edition of Whistledown. The edition comes out the next day, everybody reads it, but everybody's also getting ready for that night's ball, which is to be held at the Bridgerton household. Everybody of standing shows up. That includes Cressida, who unfortunately seems to have found a husband, although she's not a fan of him. He's one of her dad's friends. The guy is ancient. He's pushing probably 70. He wants kids. It's nothing that Cressida wants. She needs to figure out how to get out of this arranged marriage, and she asks Eloise for help, but Eloise is a little preoccupied at the moment. As Cressida is explaining all of this to Eloise, Eloise can't take her eyes off of Penelope and her brother, so finally she leaves the conversation with Cressida and her problems and goes and addresses Penelope one-on-one and says, either my brother is very understanding or you haven't told him yet. And Penelope admits, no, I haven't told him, I haven't found the right moment. And Eloise cuts her off and says, you have till midnight. And if you don't tell him by midnight, I'm going to tell him. So now Penelope is really stressed out. Most of the rest of the party is drama-free for the couples. Benedict shows up with Lady Tilly Arnold. Violet Bridgerton did invite Marcus, although Lady Danbury's not a fan of that. And Francesca introduces Lord Kilmartin to her brother. And once Francesca and Lord Kilmartin kind of leave within earshot, Antony, Violet, and Lady Danbury all talk about this relationship. They like Lord Kilmartin, but they'd like somebody better to get Francesca out of her shell. It just seems like Lord Kilmartin is too much like Francesca. And there's also the matter of the Queen. The Queen already picked who she wants Francesca to marry. They don't really want to piss her off. But for the time being, they're willing to just let Francesca play this out until they have to step in. Colin then gives up and gives a speech about his engagement to Penelope. Eloise also gives a speech, although it's dripping with innuendos to Penelope that she needs to tell Colin that she is Lady Whistledown. And then everybody gets together in the drawing room to play charades. As the clock ticks down, though, Eloise is getting more and more annoyed because she sees that Penelope is yet to tell her brother. And as she's standing there, just looking angry, Cressida comes up and says, okay, I thought of a great plan on how I'm not going to have to marry this old guy. I'm going to find out who Lady Whistledown is, and I'm going to collect that reward. And Eloise kind of laughs at her and says, you're not going to be able to figure out who she is. I mean, even I couldn't figure out who she is. And Cressida kind of takes that as an insult. She tells Eloise that she will find a way to obtain that reward, and she storms off. No, all Eloise cares about, though, is that clock ticking down. And when it's about 5 minutes away from reaching midnight and reaching Eloise's deadline, it's getting more and more awkward for Penelope, who can't seem to find a way to tell Colin. And what makes it even worse is the fact that the room is now talking about Whistledown. Penelope realizes that she's going to have to tell Colin, or else Eloise will live up to her end of this bargain. She runs off for a little bit. When she comes back, she's almost ready to tell him. She's trying to, at least. And that's when Cressida steps up. Because Cressida was involved in a conversation with a bunch of the other people in the room. And they were saying how whoever Whistledown ends up being, she's probably going to be ostracized from society and no one's going to want to marry her. And that's exactly what Cressida wants. So at the moment that Penelope is about to tell Colin that she is Lady Whistledown, Cressida stands up and announces to the entire room, I am Lady Whistledown. To which Penelope has a panic attack over. Oh, and finally, Kate and Antony tell Violet that they're expecting a child. And in episode 6, the entire town is abuzz over Cressida saying that she's Lady Whistledown. And while this should be a relief to Penelope because, well, Cressida just took credit for something that became a big burden on Penelope, it's not a relief at all. In fact, it pisses off Penelope. She starts writing her edition of Whistledown, just disparaging Cressida, saying how she's a liar, but she can't quite find the words to it. Now, she's more insulted about the fact that her bully growing up is taking credit for her creation. But it's not like everybody believes that Cressida is Lady Whistledown. Colin, for one, doesn't believe it. He goes over to the Featherington household that morning to tell Penelope, I know that you've been trying to tell me something, and I just want to let you know, whenever you're ready, no rush. But then he starts asking her, do you really think that Cressida could be Whistledown? I just don't see it. And Penelope, of course, says, no, I don't see it either. But Cressida's own mother doesn't believe it either. Now, her father, he is disgusted by her behavior. He wants to send her away to Scotland to live with one of her aunts. He can't believe that she is the town gossip. But her mother knows her daughter, and her mother knows that her daughter just isn't witty enough and observant enough to be Lady Whistledown. As her mother is telling her all of this, the Queen's men come to gather up Cressida and bring her to the castle. The Queen wants to talk to her. When Cressida does get in front of the Queen asks why exactly she decided to turn herself in. I mean, for $5,000, you would think that she was making way more than that just selling the pamphlet herself. And Cressida, thinking quickly on her feet, says, well, I didn't want someone else getting paid over my name, so I'll take that reward money. But the Queen isn't about to just hand it over to Cressida. She wants proof. She wants to read the latest edition of Whistledown before it goes out, which means that Cressida is going to have to write a Whistledown issue herself, which, quite frankly, she's not capable of. As Cressida and her mother are leaving the castle, they know they have to figure out something, because Cressida's options are come up with a Whistledown issue, get the $5,000, and be able to live on her own, or get cast out of society, move to Scotland, and be a spinster. Neither are great right now. Now over at the Bridgerton household, Colin at this point has returned, and there's big news. Francesca announces that her and Lord Kilmartin will be getting married. But with this announcement, it gets Eloise just thinking about her brother's upcoming wedding. And now her brother still doesn't know the truth. So later in the day, she goes and has a conversation with her brother because she knows her brother went to talk to Penelope earlier in the day, and she wants to poke around to see if Penelope did tell Colin about the whole Whistledown thing. But it becomes apparent that no, she did not tell Colin the truth. And Colin asks Eloise, did you know about Cressida being Whistledown? Eloise shakes her head and says, no, I didn't. I mean, Their friendship was already souring, but this was the last straw. Eloise does tell her brother, I will go talk to the author, and I will see if maybe I can put an end to Lady Whistledown. She never once says Cressida because she doesn't want to lie to her brother, and later in the day, she goes and has a conversation with Penelope, who, ironically, is trying to edit her unsuccessful Whistledown pamphlet. She thinks that Penelope is crazy for not giving up Whistledown. I mean, this is her golden opportunity to get out of this lie. She implores Penelope to just be the bigger person, get over the fact that it was Cressida who took the fall, and just accept it. Retire Whistledown. Go live your life with Colin. Be happy. The two go back and forth on the topic, but once Eloise does leave, Penelope realizes that Eloise is right. She really should retire Whistledown's name. Later that night, as Penelope is sitting there with all of her Whistledown pamphlets, her mother comes into the room and gives her probably the worst time pep talk of all time about how she needs to give up on her dreams because she's marrying Colin, a man of stature and sophistication, and now her dreams are Colin's dreams. Because the way that Lady Featherton sees it, women are merely servants, and that is it. They are there to have babies and look good. Nothing more. They're not a mind at all. And that certainly isn't really appealing to Penelope, and it's one of the reasons why she created Whistledown. And to hear that from her mother and know she has to give up Whistledown in the same day, it's tough. And as for Colin, he spent the night at Mondrich's club, although unfortunately that club is closing. Alice got to Mondrich and convinced him that men of society do not work anymore, so it'll be the final hurrah. You've got Colin, you've got Benedict, and you've got Will along with Lord Kilmartin, and they just drink it up. Lord Kilmartin and Francesca do have a slight issue, though. They haven't announced that they're going to get married. And they want to address it with the Queen first because they know that Lord Kilmartin wasn't her preferred choice. They kind of need her blessing. It's something that's got Violet Bridgerton a little nervous, especially when Francesca asks Violet, hey, can you go talk to the Queen for us? That's something that Violet is terrified to do. And the next day when everybody's at the church and the betrothals are announced, you don't hear Lord Kilmartin or Francesca because of this. A couple that you do hear, though, is Penelope and Colin. And after the ceremony, Colin asks Penelope, hey, what was it, though, that you did want to tell me? And Penelope doesn't tell him anything about Whistledown. She just tells him that she has loved him since the moment she saw him. Outside of the church, though, as everybody's mingling, Eloise sees Cressida Cowper wearing basically camouflage. No, in all seriousness, she's trying to hide from society, but she's wearing Barbie pink. Stevie Wonder could spot her, and Eloise does. She walks over to Cressida to see what the hell she's doing, and Cressida has come because she needs Eloise's help in writing a Whistledown letter. She's already told Eloise about this marriage she doesn't want to be a part of, her plan to get the $5,000 bounty. And now, it looking more and more bleak, she just needs help. But even though Eloise knows that Cressida is not Lady Whistledown, she pretends as if Cressida is, and she refuses to help her out. While this is going on across the square, Lady Danbury is having a conversation with Violet about this whole going to the Queen and telling the Queen about the marriage between Francesca and Lord Kilmartin. It's true that Violet is nervous about asking the Queen, but she gets more nervous when Lady Danbury tells her that if the Queen even sniffs the fact that Violet isn't fully convinced this marriage will work, the Queen isn't going to give her blessing, which makes Violet not want to go up to the Queen even more. And the hesitancy is something that Francesca can see. She sees the difference in the way her mother acts when Colin and Penelope come over, as opposed to her and Lord Kilmartin. But for the moment, she's just kind of shutting up about it. Later in the week, it's Penelope's turn to finally go to the modiste for a dress. The modiste, being one of the few people that knows who Whistledown actually is, asks Penelope if she's told Colin about the Whistledown fact, but Penelope says, no, I'm actually going to let Cressida take credit for it. I'm retiring. You can tell that the modiste thinks that this might be a mistake. And as for Cressida, life is not going great right now. Her father's even more pissed off because he's gotten exiled from a couple of the clubs, and she's having a problem writing any kind of Whistledown-esque letter. It's been days since her and her mother have visited the Queen, and she's gotten no more than a couple of sentences. Her mother tells her, we got to publish something before the real Whistledown actually does publish a pamphlet, and then we're screwed. So the two get to work, and they start writing a Whistledown pamphlet, although it's not really a pamphlet, it's just more of a statement saying that her next issue will be coming out soon. That's really it. She's planning on debuting this at the next ball, which is actually going to be hosted by the Mondriches. It's the first time they are hosting a ball. But one person that won't be attending this is Benedict. He got invited to a dinner party by Lady Arnold along with her friend Paul. Although this dinner party gets spicy. Yeah, like we're talking, it's a threesome. Although no one told Benedict that. And while Benedict's been through orgies before, for whatever reason, when he gets invited to participate in this threesome, he runs away. Very surprising stuff. No word on if Paul laid the wood that night. You'd assume so, though. The rest of the Bridgertons, though, they're at the Mondrich's house for this ball. And as everybody dances around, Francesca asks her mother to go talk to the queen before the queen leaves, but once again, Violet just makes an excuse. Francesca, though, continues to push. Violet continues to push back, and the conversation comes to a head when Violet says, "I'm not trying to ruin things for you." And Francesca says, "Why would you ruin things? I mean, do you not think that me and Lord Kilmartin's relationship would make the queen happy?" Francesca calls her mom on her bullshit and says, "You haven't supported me with this marriage. You don't believe in it." Lady Bridgerton starts saying, "Look, Lord Kilmartin is wonderful, but..." And Francesca cuts her off and says, "But what? I love the guy." Violet is so upset at herself that she starts to leave the ball. She can't believe she's acting like this about a love match. And Marcus, who's been kind of courting her this entire season, chases after her, but he gets stopped by Lady Danbury. And those two finally get into it. He can't figure out why Lady Danbury hates him so much, what he did, and she tells him that what he did was get in the way of her dreams. Because right before she was married off to that old guy, she nearly escaped to freedom, but she was caught. And when she was brought back, she overheard her father thanking Marcus. So she feels like Marcus betrayed her. And you can see in Marcus's face that he does remember the moment, but he didn't realize the impact of whatever it is he told his father at that time. He tries to explain himself, but Lady Danbury ain't having any of it. She storms off. As those two exit, the drama arrives. Cressida and her mother show up, and they make quite an entrance. When they finally do get in front of the queen, they have a bunch of people bring in the Whistledown pamphlets, and it looks as if Cressida is, in fact, Whistledown. The queen, though, isn't convinced. She wants to see the next issue. And when she sees it, then she'll discuss the actual reward money with Cressida. When Penelope sees this fake pamphlet, she loses it. She gets so pissed off. Even though she accepted the fact that she should no longer be Lady Whistledown, she can't let this one slide. But she's not the only one who's upset, so is Eloise. She feels like Cressida is going to come after her because she ended their friendship. And now Cressida has a little bit of power, the entire town thinking she is Whistledown. She can, indeed, print a pamphlet. Penelope sits down with her and says, "I will fix this because I'm going to publish again." So she runs out of there, grabbing a carriage, and on the way to the printer, she writes the latest edition of Whistledown. She drops it off, she gets a rush order, but as she's walking back to the carriage, she's caught by Polin. And he is shocked, but also mad as hell that she is Lady Whistledown. In episode 7, Colin is understandably pissed. He can't believe that Penelope was Lady Whistledown this entire time. He followed her there thinking that her carriage driver had kidnapped her, but in reality, he never expected this, and he feels completely betrayed. He leaves Penelope just standing there on the side of the road, and he has to go have a think. As for the letter that she actually published that day, it comes out and it completely discredits anything that Cressida put in her letter, which was a pretty damning letter all about the Bridgertons. It besmirched their good name. It was really embarrassing. But once Penelope's Lady Whistledown comes out and says, Cressida's paper, that ain't me, she's not me, don't believe anything it says, it takes out any actual sting and no one believes her. Because of this, it looks like Cressida's going to be spending her days with her aunt, which she obviously wanted to avoid. The next day, though, as everybody is reading Penelope's Whistledown and the town is abuzz about what happened with Cressida, Penelope, along with her family, are heading to look at a location for the breakfast they're going to have the morning that she's married to Colin. She, however, is just not in the right headspace because all she can think about is what happened with her and Colin the previous day. And as her mother, and her sister are walking to this location, she runs into Eloise and she tells her, "Yeah, your brother knows." He's really pissed off, and we're supposed to marry this week if he wants to, but I kind of doubt it at this point. Eloise tells her, look, I can't help you with this, because Eloise still isn't sure how she feels about the relationship between her brother and her former but quasi-current best friend. She's just very conflicted on it, and Penelope understands. And when Eloise gets home that day, she's confronted by Colin, who demands to know when she found out, because Colin knows that if anybody knew that Penelope was Lady Whistledown, it would be Eloise. And Eloise admits, I only found out last year, and because of it, I just didn't want to deal with it, so I stopped being friends with her. Colin's pretty pissed off about it, but then Eloise goes back at him for falling in love with her best friend, and she goes on to explain that she figured after a while, what did it really matter that Penelope was Lady Whistledown? She wasn't about to tell her brother and ruin his wedding and his love for her best friend. What good would that do? As for Penelope, at this point, she's shown up at the location where they're supposed to have their wedding day breakfast, but it's really awkward between her and Colin, and it's noticeable from both Lady Featherington and Lady Bridgerton. While they plan for this breakfast, over in the corner, Colin and Penelope have an uncomfortable conversation where he says that he will marry Penelope, but it's only because he's a man of honor, he said he would, and he feels entrapped. When he asks her if she's planning on stopping the Whistledown pamphlet, she's honest with him and says, I don't know. And he looks at her completely amazed. He then collects his thoughts and says, let's just get through this wedding and figure out what this marriage is going to be. But this isn't the only awkward interaction that happens that day between a couple. As Violet and Colin had headed out for the day, Benedict had gotten a letter from Lady Tilly Arnold that said, hey, let me explain what happened the other night. And Benedict's willing to hear her out, and she says, look, what me and Paul have is kind of like what me and you have. Like, we're friends with benefits, all right? We like to get down with each other, use our mouths as fun places. The thing about Paul is he likes women, but he also likes men, and he thought that maybe, you'd be down for that. And Benedict tells her, like, I don't really do that, and she's fine with it. She says, okay, but let me and you continue on our own. My staff's discreet. Go think about it. And thinking is exactly what his mother is doing when she got home later that day. She can't quite figure out why the relationship between her son and her future daughter-in-law has become so awkward, but her little brainstorming session gets interrupted when she gets a caller, and it's Marcus. She's surprised. She's also happy. She tells Marcus that the latest news is that her daughter Francesca is to be married to Lord Kilmartin. And he thinks that's great, but he does ask her, when you're done with those affairs with your daughter, do you think me and you could try something? And she's a little taken aback, surprised, but says, I'm not opposed to it. I just won't know if I'm into it until after that wedding is done. A couple days later is the wedding day, but before the wedding day, actually the night before the wedding, Penelope needs to go confide in the one person that really knew the whole time she was Whistledown, and that's the modiste. The person who made her wedding dress, although she's not really there for that. She's just there to talk about what she's going through at the moment, about to marry a guy that she's in love with, but doesn't quite love her back because of this betrayal. And as always, the modiste makes her feel a lot better, having a conversation about true love and all that. But as she's leaving, she runs into Colin in the middle of the night on the street. And Colin immediately wants to know what she's doing because it seems shady, but then he says, no, you know what, I don't want to know. And the two get into an argument because she says, well, what the hell are you doing out here? This argument rolls into Penelope trying to explain herself about the Whistledown papers, Colin not really buying any of it or not wanting to listen. Colin yells at her how foolish she's been. She says, well, I can take care of myself. And he says, well, then what good am I to you? And she yells at him, I love you. And that is when they just can't take it anymore. The sexual tension is too much. And they end up kissing. Colin throwing her against a wall in a darkly lit nook. His fingers once again going to work. But then a carriage drives by and they realize we probably shouldn't be doing this in public the night before our wedding. So I'm just going to put you in the carriage and I'll see you tomorrow. When Colin gets home later that night, he's surprised because Anthony and Kate are back. He expected to see him tomorrow, but he didn't expect him to see him tonight. And Kate tells him, we came back because your mother figured something was going on, and we just wanted to have a talk about marriage. And Colin is like, yeah, of course my mom figured out something was wrong. She knows everything. All right, lay it on me. And Kate tells him marriage is difficult. It's not always easy. It's not always sunshine and rainbows. It's hard work, but you got to put that work in. Because ultimately, true love is worth that hard work. Gives Colin a lot to think about, and then he goes to bed. The next day, most of the town is getting ready to go to the nuptials between Colin Bridgerton, Penelope Featherington, and Lady Danbury is one of those people. As she's preparing to leave, she goes into one of the rooms of her house, and Marcus is waiting for her. And she's pissed off to see him. The last time these two spoke, she was leaving the ball and telling him off. And he came to truly explain himself. Yes, Marcus did end up telling on her as she was trying to escape, but Marcus was also 10 years old. He had no idea what he was doing. Had he known, he wouldn't have done it. But everything was taken out of context and just a big misunderstanding. And as the two talk it out, it seems like they're in a much, much better space. With Lady Danbury now realizing, yeah, I got really mad at a 10-year-old boy. Grow up, Lady Danbury. You know I love you. Lady Danbury then heads to the church, where a very nervous Penelope walks down the aisle. She doesn't know what kind of Colin she's walking down to. But as she's making her way down, Colin gives her a nod, and it puts her entire mind at ease. The two are married. It seems legitimate. It seems like the talk between Anthony, Kate, and himself really hit home, and he seems just generally happy to be marrying Penelope. After the wedding, everybody heads over to the location of the post-wedding breakfast, and everybody's in good spirits. Even Penelope's sisters are complimentary of how she looks that day. It's very out of character. Not too far away from this complimentary fest is Lady Bridgerton and Lady Danbury. Danbury mentions to Violet how she and Marcus showed up together, but she's since lost them. And Violet loves hearing that because she knows that it means Lady Danbury made up with her brother. And Lady Danbury says, yeah, it felt good. Maybe you should try it, though. Looking at Kilmartin and Francesca. To which Violet says, yes, that is the plan. I have to fix that wrong. She actually has every intention of talking to the Queen, but Lady Danbury tells her, you might not want to do it right this second. The Queen's really hung up on trying to find out who Whistledown is, so I'll tell you when the moment's right. Actually, it seems like the only person that's not having a good time at this breakfast is Eloise. Her conflicted feelings about the relationship is just still getting at her, and Benedict has to remind her that just because her brother and her best friend married doesn't mean she's losing either of them. She has a special relationship with both, and that special relationship will continue. And even though that's a great pep talk, it doesn't quite work. Eloise has to leave the room. But that pep talk actually got Benedict thinking about the relationship that he has with Lady Tilly Arnold and this possible relationship with Paul. It's got him reconsidering what she talked about with him. Maybe he should give this thruple thing a try. Of course, last season we thought that there might be a thruple situation between Anthony, Kate, and Kate's sister, Edwina. And of course, Edwina went off to marry, and she's currently in India. Kate's giving Anthony an update, and she mentions how she would love to go back to India. And Anthony says, then let's do it. Let's go back to India. Let's actually have our baby in India. Because our baby's always going to be a Bridgerton, but I want our baby to know that it's also a shawarma. And here Kate didn't think that she could love Anthony anymore, but it turns out she could, because she loves that idea. And the two are planning on heading off to India and having their baby there. And then as for the actual happy bride and groom, they decide to buck the trend and dance at this breakfast to a violin concerto of You Belong With Me. It's a real bop. Everybody actually gets involved, including Lord Kilmartin and Francesca, which is a surprise. But Lord Kilmartin was encouraged by her brothers a couple nights ago to be bold. And his idea of being bold is dancing in public. Look, it's baby steps. But all this dancing gets interrupted when the Queen shows up. And the Queen didn't show up to get some bacon and eggs. No, she showed up because she feels like she figured out who Whistledown is. She instructs everybody, not named Bridgerton, to get out of the room. And since Penelope just married into the family, she's forced to stay. And once it's only her and the Bridgertons remaining, she tells them, I know that one of you is keeping a secret. And the longer you keep it, it's going to piss me off. So come forward and confess. Now, Francesca feels like she knows that the secret's about her and Lord Kilmartin. So she comes forward and says, it's me. I've been keeping the secret. I'm supposed to marry Lord Kilmartin. We kept it from you. I apologize. But, hey, can we get married? And the queen looks at her and says, girl, I don't care who you marry, love marriage, arranged marriage. No, no, no. I know one of you is Whistledown. Because it's amazing. When Cressida published lies about this family, Whistledown came and defended that family at all costs. The only justification of this must be because she's one of you. She demands that Lady Whistledown step forward, but nobody does. I mean, Penelope's frozen, and Antony tells the queen, I would know if Lady Whistledown was in my family. Of course, he's oblivious. And the queen, not knowing exactly who it is, just has to accept this, but she does say, all right, well, I'll leave, but I'll find out soon enough who you are. After the queen does leave, Penelope pulls Colin aside and says, I'm sorry, I didn't know what to do. And he tells her, well, I'm happy that you stayed silent, but this is a good sign that you need to give up the pamphlet. The longer you hide this, the longer this lie is going to hang over us. But Penelope doesn't want to give up Whistledown because she tells Colin, do you know what it's like to have no place that you can truly be yourself? No, you don't, because you're not a woman. You don't have to conceal who you want to be, but I do. And I am Whistledown, and I'm not going to change that. And Colin looks at her and says, well, I'm not going to accept that. I'm going to sleep on the sofa tonight. Yeah, the night that they get married, he's going to just hit up the love sack. It gets Penelope crying, and the only person she can turn to is her friend Eloise, who does comfort her in that moment. There is one Bridgerton getting laid that night, though, and it's Benedict. He had a good think about it. He heads on over to Tilly Arnold's house. Her, Tilly, Paul, they all get after it. It's hot, it's heavy, and it's going to piss off a lot of conservatives. But all this drama about Whistledown, we haven't talked about the fake one, Cressida, who's trying to figure out how she's going to avoid getting sent off to her aunts. She knows she's going to need money for that, so that night she starts looking around the printers to collect her payment for the Whistledown pamphlet that she sold. Problem is, she doesn't really know what printer she went to, so she just starts going from printer to printer asking for payment, trying to figure out if that's the correct one. And the third one she goes to isn't the right one, but the guy says, yeah, you're not her, right? Because I used to work at a place that did print hers, and my boss told me that she was a redhead. Just a normal redheaded girl. And that tips off Cressida enough to figure out who Whistledown really is. And in the season finale, Cressida heads right on over to the Featherington household the next day and confronts Penelope about it. Now, initially, Penelope denies, but Cressida continues on because she knows that Penelope is Whistledown. And what she wants is very simple. She wants double of what the queen was offering for the head of Whistledown to stay quiet. If she doesn't get double, then she's going to reveal exactly who Whistledown is to everybody, blowing Penelope's cover. Penelope kind of calls Cressida's bluff, saying, well, you don't have proof. But when Lady Featherington walks in the room and Cressida starts telling her, I mean, think about it. Your daughter's over here. She's pretty conspicuous. She hears all this gossip. I mean, how did you never figure it out? It puts the fear of God into Penelope. And when Cressida leaves, she's forced to admit to her mother, yes, I am Whistledown, which her mother reacts just like everybody else reacts when they find out that Penelope's Whistledown. She starts thinking about all the nasty things that Whistledown wrote about her or her family, and she gets pissed off. She's also really concerned about the fact that this would be grounds for an annulment. And Penelope yells at her mom, I don't want to lie anymore. I've got to tell Colin about what Cressida is going to do. Meanwhile, Colin had headed over to his house to think about the ramifications of Penelope being revealed as Whistledown. And at this point, he doesn't know about Cressida. He's just thinking about the ramifications between Whistledown and the Queen. And it's Eloise who has to come to him and say, you'll survive. I mean, a year ago, people thought I was Whistledown, and look, I'm still here. As Eloise is trying to make Colin feel better about the situation, their conversation is interrupted by Lady Featherington and Penelope, who have come over to tell Colin about the Cressida blackmail. Penelope just wants to pay her off, pay the $10,000. She's got it after selling all those Whistledowns for all those years, which does come as a surprise to her mother and Colin and just about everybody in the room. But Colin says, no, we're not paying this. I'll go over, I'll talk to Cressida, I'll talk her off the ledge, and I'll fix this mess. You guys sit tight. The problem is Colin doesn't fix the mess at all. Actually, he makes it worse. He pleads with Cressida to keep her mouth shut, but Cressida says, no, I'm not going to do that, Colin. Your family, you got, it's all easy for you. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to now want double. Instead of 10,000, I want 20,000. And I want your little wife to write a pamphlet fixing my good name. As Colin was getting rejected by Cressida, Penelope, Eloise, Lady Featherington, well, they had nothing to do but sit around and wait for his arrival to find out what she said. And it gets Penelope and Eloise chatting about Cressida. Eloise defending Cressida a little bit, just saying, yeah, she wasn't really that bad, but admitting that the friendship did start out because she just wanted to piss off Penelope. As the two are laughing about that and about to kick off the conversation of books, Colin walks back in the room and tells everybody, yeah, I done messed up. It's bad. Looks like Penelope might have been right. We probably should just pay her. And Penelope says, well, Colin, the problem is I have 10. I don't have 20. And Colin says, I'll get the money. I'll have to make up a lie about why I need the money, but yeah, I'll go halves in and we'll just keep this quiet. As Colin goes to sort his affairs out, his mother had a really busy day. She met with Francesca and Lord Kilmartin. They talked about the wedding, where Francesca told her mother, after we get married in a very small ceremony, we're moving to Scotland. We're going to live at Lord Kilmartin's place. And Violet, just wanting to be supportive, nods, but she's not happy about it. She doesn't want to lose her daughter. And that night, she confides in Lady Danbury that it just feels like her daughter's rushing to leave her. Lady Danbury, being a really good friend, tells Violet, you're going to have me at least. I mean, I'll always be there for you, as will my brother. This is a really awkward conversation between the two, where Lady Danbury admits to Violet that she hooked up with her dad years ago. Violet admits to Lady Danbury that she knew the whole time she didn't care because her dad was a good man and Lady Danbury's always been a really good friend. But because of that relationship with Danbury and Lord Bridgerton, she just wanted to let Violet know that she's okay if Violet were to pursue a relationship with Marcus. The moral of the story here is find a friendship like Violet and Lady Danbury. What I hope you don't find is the early stages of Penelope and Colin's marriage, because my dude's still sleeping on the sofa like 3 days in. They've yet to share a bed, and they have to head to Francesca's small wedding where Penelope tells Colin, I'll just let you go in your own carriage. I don't want to force you to be with me. She heads home to get ready and get dressed, but she overhears a conversation between her mother and Walter Dundas. Walter Dundas finally got the proof he needed to catch Lady Featherington in this lie. He's planning on sending his results to the castle, and when it's filed, the Featheringtons are going to lose their title. And Penelope can't believe this when she overhears the conversation. She really believed her mother had just inherited all this money from some aunt. But to find out that her mother had done this, on top of what she's going through with her own marriage, it's just a lot for poor Pen. And as Penelope confronts her mother confronts Penelope about the whole Whistledown thing. She basically tells Penelope, what I did and what you did, this deceit, it's no different. I did what I had to do to protect this family. Who are you protecting with your column? The conversation gets really, really contentious until finally it dies out. And Lady Featherington says, me and you did the best we could with the offerings that society gave us. She then makes a joke about what Lady Whistledown would write regarding their disgrace once she's exposed. And Penelope sits down next to her mother and says, she's going to write whatever I want her to write. And her mother looks at her daughter and says, that's a really great power that you've created for yourself. Penelope then heads over to the Bridgerton household where, in a small ceremony, Francesca marries Lord Kilmartin. And during cocktail hour, everyone's kind of noticing that Lord Anderson is smitten with Violet Bridgerton. But also nobody cares because Violet looks happy. And she is. She's also really nervous about this potential relationship between her and Marcus. That much is very obvious. She then shares a really nice moment with Francesca playing the piano, but as they're doing so, Penelope pulls Colin aside and says, I need to talk to you. She tells Colin, I can't ask you to lie for money on my behalf. And Colin says, how am I supposed to help you then? And she yells at him, by loving me. She goes into all the great things that Colin has done for her, but also the reasons why she loves Colin. And she finishes it off by saying, all I need from you is to stand by me. The problem for Colin is, as long as this lie is out there about Whistledown, there's always going to be something between he and Penelope that probably can't get fixed. And she understands it. So she's planning on putting an end to it. She writes the Queen, and she tells the Queen, I am Whistledown, but let me address society before you expose me. She also writes a letter to Violet kind of saying the same thing, just saying, I have been hiding this secret. If you want, you can ask your son about it. To which Colin tells his mother the entire story. Now, for the Bridgertons, just a matter of waiting for the queen to show up and give Penelope her chance to tell society who Whistledown really is. It's just a matter of playing the waiting game at this point. One thing that Benedict is not waiting for is another chance at Lady Tilly Arnold and her friend Paul. He heads over to Lady Tilly Arnold's place to find out that Paul is busy with somebody else that night. And Tilly takes that opportunity to have a conversation with Benedict about how she's having feelings for him. She didn't expect it, but it happened. And Benedict appreciates it, but the problem is this relationship, this throuple situation, has really opened his eyes to a sexual renaissance for Benedict. And it's a sexual renaissance that he's not willing to give up at the moment. He's having too much fun having sex with all sorts of people. And Tilly understands it, and she's going to respect his wishes, but she does say it felt really good to kind of commit to somebody. So Benedict's forced to head home. He didn't get laid, and he finds his sister Eloise sitting on the swing having a think. Benedict's always taking these opportunities to sit and chat with his sister and find out what's going on in her head and try to make her feel better in the moment, this being no different. At the moment, the thing that's bothering Eloise the most is the fact that she wants to change the world, but she realized that she's never been outside of her town. In order to change the world, she has to see the world. After talking with Benedict, and it's not like he gave her this idea, but she comes to the conclusion that she really wants to go off with her sister and Lord Kilmartin to Scotland. It's a baby step in seeing the world, and she's planning on asking him the next day. The next day is going to be a big ball held by both Prudence and Portia, because since they're both pregnant, they realize that they don't have a lot of time left in society to kind of turn up, if you will. So they want to throw a huge ball. The problem is they were hard up on money. They had grandiose ideas, but they didn't have a grandiose bank account. They were forced to give their ideas to Farley and hope to God that she kind of saw their vision. And once they see what Farley did, they're blown away, because Farley did, in fact, see their vision, and it was an expensive one. So, of course, they just start thanking their mother profusely for paying for it all. And Lady Featherington is very confused until she looks back at her daughter, Penelope, and sees a wry smirk on her face. Penelope took her money from Whistledown, and she gave her sisters the ball that they would want. She also took no credit for it and gave all the credit to Lady Featherington, which is something that Lady Featherington really appreciated. It's such a big ball that the entire town turns out for it, which gives the queen a really good audience to take Penelope up on her offer. She interrupts the entire ball. She tells the crowd that Lady Whistledown reached out and she wants to reveal herself to everybody. And then she gives the floor to Penelope. Penelope comes forward, very nervous, very sheepish, but she explains to everybody why she was Whistledown, how she was impressed by the fact that they were just all being themselves and she could be in the shadows and kind of live vicariously through them. And at first, she didn't think that anyone would care about her writing, but once people did care, it gave her a sense of power, and anybody who's ever had power understands that that's a pretty intoxicating feeling. At the end of this long speech where she felt like she'd be ripped apart, nobody really cares. The thrill of finding out who Whistledown is was kind of taken away with Cressida, even though that turned out to be the wrong Whistledown. Once the real one was revealed, it was like, okay, what's next? This also took away all power that Cressida Cowper had, so she's forced to go off with her aunt. But, most importantly, it gives the Featheringtons an excuse on why they came in all that money. Penelope goes to her mother and says, now you can tell Walter Dundas that you were able to afford this lifestyle because of my writing. The ball continues to go on, everybody seems to have a good time, and Colin, at one point, walks up to Penelope and tells her that before that night's ball, he reread all of the love letters that she had written to him when he was away. At the time, he didn't know that they were love letters, but what it did was reinvigorate that flame that he had for her. He loves her. He wants to be with her. It's a very happy ending. It's also going to be a happy ending for Eloise, who asks Francesca if it's cool if she comes to Scotland, and Francesca's like, yeah, that's fine with me. And it's actually Lord Kilmartin who's really pumped about it. But Eloise won't be the only one coming to Scotland with them. Lord Kilmartin's cousin, Michaela, will also be coming. And when Michaela gets introduced to Francesca, Francesca is really, really taken aback, at a loss for words. It seems like, it seems like she's kind of got a crush. The next day, Penelope writes her final edition of Whistledown. She thanks all the readers, but she says, "I'm hanging up my quill." Fast forward a couple months later, all the Featherington girls had babies. The only one that had a boy, though, was Penelope, because Colin Bridgerton knows how to go deep. And as for Colin, he took Penelope's advice and he published that book. And it's really good. It's getting rave reviews. And that is the end of Season 3 of Bridgerton. Thank you so much for getting this part of the recap. I really appreciate it. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Hit thumbs up if you like this. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought this recap sucked. What I don't want you to do, though, is write nasty comments because those make me feel bad. You aren't Lady Whistledown. You don't need to be rude, okay? I will find you. I will hunt you down. No, I'm not going to do any of that. I don't have enough time and resources. But I'm just asking politely, please don't be mean. Also, go buy a t-shirt. I have those and mugs and hats and all that. I got bills to pay, so that would be cool too. But just know, I'll be back for Season 4.